So the wiring in the steering columns of our F100s are an often failure point. So I'm going to try to go through and show you what it actually takes to rewire the steering column itself. So we went out and picked up a new wiring kit. This one is from Dennis Carpenter. Any of the parts storehouses will have these, and it's a good point to start with. For this video, I'm going to be using the steering column out of my 64 F100. There are some differences between the 64 F100s and the 65 to 72s. This style of kit, you will have to do a little bit of manual wiring to make it work in the older trucks, but with a newer truck and a newer column like we installed in our truck, it's simply a plug and play. So the first step of this whole entire thing is probably honestly the hardest, and that is getting the actual steering wheel off. So you've got one nut in the center, and then it's simply held on by the splines. If you haven't removed your steering wheel, it could be really stuck on there, so you may have to go down to your local parts store and rent a puller, or you can just simply try to fight it off. I definitely suggest leaving the nut on the actual steering shaft when you're trying to remove it, just in case this thing pops off, you won't come back and smack yourself in the face. With our steering column off, our next step is going to be removing the turn signal stock. That simply screws in, and as you can see, if you're not able to remove it by hand like I am, there is a flat spot on this where you can get a wrench on and turn it off. Just be gentle with this because this does go into the actual electronics that the turn signal uses. Now that you've got your steering wheel and the spring behind it out of the way, we can actually get to the turn signal itself. So this whole entire unit is a piece of plastic, so just be really gentle with it. There are 3 screws that hold on a metal washer, and you're going to have to remove all 3 of those to actually pull this unit away. And as you can see, you may have to go and move the turn signal so you can get access to all 3 of the screws. So from here, we can lift off this metal washer. You got to make sure your orientation and how it sits on there. Obviously the back side will usually be cleaner, but this is one piece that we have to keep. So next you're going to crawl underneath your dash and you're going to find the lead that comes out of the steering column, and the most daunting part, we're going to cut it off. So with this, leave enough room where you can have some wire hanging out of the bottom here, because we're going to run a string or a wire on this so it pulls another wire as we pull it up to the column. That's going to make it much easier to bring our wires back down whenever we go to rewire it. So one thing I would do is clean off where you're going to attach your wires to, because you want that tape to stick on there. It's just going to make your life a lot easier. So I've got a length of wire. I'm going to just use electrical tape, because you also have to keep this from being too terribly bulky, so it's able to fit up inside of the steering column. So with our trace wire in place, we are going to try and gently remove the turn signal unit itself, pulling up while trying to push the wires up into the column. Okay, so I've run into a little bit of issue. As we're starting to pull it out, this sheath is not going any further into our hole here. So what I'm going to do is actually pull this sheath out and expose the wires. So as you can see, just a little piece of rubber. Get that out of the way, and then I'm going to retape again. Okay, now this is the actual part you need to start paying attention. So this is the factory plug. Yours may look slightly different, but it'll be something like this. So we need to match up these wires, what they do, as comparison to where they're at on our old unit, because these new units often will have different color wires going to different locations. So we're going to take our new and our old turn signals and we're going to compare the colors of the wires and where they go. Now we can already notice a couple things. One, we don't have these arms on this old one, and that's because they've broken off, and that's why we're trying to replace this unit, is the autocorrect on the steering column, so whenever you turn back it doesn't automatically turn the turn signal. So now's when you're going to have to take both of your units and compare them and see what changes they have on them. Most of them are going to look a little bit different, and you can almost guarantee that the wires won't be the same colors in the same locations. Also, as you can see with this one, with this unit, we don't have two posts. In fact, we're even missing the horn post. So the horn never worked on this truck, and that's part of the reason why. Whereas on our new one, we do have two posts. So with our column, we probably were going to have to remove this one completely because there's not room in the column to facilitate it. So we'll get that once we actually get it mounted, but we'll just make note of it. So the other thing to notice is this lower horn is yellow, whereas with our factory one, we actually have a blue wire. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab a notebook, write down all the colors for the new and the old, and then we're going to compare where they're at, because that's going to depend where we're going to pin them in our old connector that's going to go to the chassis. Okay, so the next step is going to be to depin our existing plug. So when we buy this kit, it does not come with this plug as a replacement. I think some kits may, but ours doesn't. So we've got to get these wires out without damaging this plug so that we can wire our new wires in. So to give you guys a better understanding, I went ahead and depinned one of these. So this is the factory pin, and as you can see, it has a tab that locks it into the plastic. So what you're going to do is you're going to take a small screwdriver or an Extractor blade or anything small enough that you can reach inside of the terminal and push this tab down while pulling at the back side of it. That's what's going to release this out of the tab. This can be really, really frustrating. Just take your time because you really don't want to damage that plug and have to wait until another one of these shows up at your doorstep. So here's a quick look down inside of the plug itself, and you're going to have to get a tool down inside of here to press on that tab. Here's a quick look at the new pins that we're going to be installing. These have two tabs on them. So some factory vehicles may have this setup as well. And the best tool for this type is one of these pin removers. All it is a thin barrel that gets pushed down, and when it goes over these two terminals, it brings them in slightly, and that lets it pull through the back of the plug. So after a little bit of fighting and fussing, I was able to get all of them out. The plug is saved, it's in good condition because we're going to reuse it. So now starts the whole reassembly process. Pretty much everything we did just in reverse. So now we have to pull all these wires back through the column, and we're going to have to tape them all up together. Now a good way to do this is actually by staggering all of these connectors. So we don't want them all in one big bunch because it makes a big knot that we can't quite fit through the small hole we have. So we'll stagger them all back like this. We'll run our wire, kind of tape all the way down, trying to, not have any sharp edges or anything that's going to get caught. It's going to make this slide down as easy as possible. So we've got all of our wires. It's a nice smooth transition. So we're just going to go ahead and pull this entire thing down. We're just going to try to go as slow as possible. So the best way to remember how the orientation of this plate goes in there is this is the threaded boss that your turn signal stock threads into. So this is going to face this way down into your column, pointing down at the bottom, and you're just going to have to look for the hole on the outside, which is right here where the turn signal lever goes in, and that's where that goes. So we'll feed our wires down. And it's going to be kind of difficult because this is thin plastic, but just use as little force as you can to get this entire thing lined up. So as I mentioned to begin with, our original one doesn't have two terminals for the horn, it only has one. And we're already running into the issue where this isn't going to install in our particular column. This piece on the bottom has nowhere for it to actually go in. And now that I'm looking at it, there's no place where these are actually going to be able to go in as well. So what we're going to have to do is just go ahead and lop off all that. I'm not going to do it on this one because, again, this is not the column that I'm going to be using. This is just one that I'm showing the video for, help you guys understand. But that may have to be cut off, as you can see here. And you may have to cut off these on the back side to get it to fit inside of your column. These are a very universal piece, so they make it to fit in any vehicle, but this is what we're going to have to do for ours. All right, once you have everything installed and screwed in at the top of the column, now we just need to go ahead and plug all of our pins into our original plug. Now, your pins are going to stick through this side, so that means they're going to be inserted through this side. And hopefully you went ahead and took good notes on how all this goes together. If not, you can still see the top of the column where these wires terminate to, and you can compare that against where your original one was and the color wires that were going to those terminals. So once you go ahead and do that, that's pretty much it. You're going to go ahead and turn on your truck, go through everything, test everything, make sure it all works, and that's pretty much it, guys. All right, guys, well, hopefully this video really helps you out getting your project back and fixed and getting it rewired. This is one of the aggravating things about old trucks is these often break, and it can seem pretty daunting to go in and rewire it yourself, but honestly, it's not too bad, just fiddly. If you want, if you need any of the parts that I used, I've got links to Amazon for all of the tools as well as the harness yourself. If you don't have a parts house that has this, make sure to go down there and check them out. And thanks guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.